FlatOut 3 is the third entry into the highly regarded FlatOut series. Well, it was, until this game came out and ruined its legacy. With an overall score of 23 on Metacritic and an overwhelmingly negative score on Steam, it's obvious something went wrong with it. I'm going to tell you what I think that is, and take a look through the issues that this game has. Spoilers, there are a lot of them. FlatOut 3 was developed by Team 6 Studios and published by Strategy First for PC in 2011. This came after the bankruptcy of Empire Interactive, the publisher of the original games, in 2009. The developer behind FlatOut 1, 2, and Ultimate Carnage is Bugbear Entertainment, now known for Wreckfest, a spiritual successor to FlatOut, and probably the best game in the genre. Team 6 is notable for their work on the Wii version of FlatOut and Glacier 3 The Meltdown, among other not well-received games. Right from the start, some issues are starting to take form. A new development team and a publisher known for making mediocre, low-budget games has taken over from a much more experienced Bugbear right after the best game in the series. Before we get into the negatives, I think it's important to cover the positives. There are only two. Throughout my time playing this game, I've had no crashes or technical issues other than the ones that are built into the game, but we'll get to that. And the frame rate remains surprisingly solid on my PC, sometimes claiming to be above 600. Not that it's needed. I also like how the graphics options change the way the game looks as you change them, but a lot of games do that, so it's not exactly high praise. So the game works, but would you actually want to play it? Probably not. The sound effects and music in this game are unbearably bad. While playing, you will hear the same breaking glass sound effect thousands of times as the AI crash behind you. Everything seems to have been taken from a stock sounds library, the cheapest one possible. Gone are the days of licensed tracks and realistic sounds, instead we have Rock Mix 2 and Hip Hop 3. One of the first things I did was turn off the music completely. It's unbearable after a few races. Thankfully, they do allow you to play your own music through your music folder if you want to. Something else that's missing from this game is characters that are at all interesting or meaningful. In the older games, it showed you who you were up against with each driver having their own vehicle choice and personality. Here we have 21 PS2 rejects who have nothing but a sentence of character. Just look at this, and this. Picking one over the other doesn't actually mean anything. In races you see their names in the leaderboard at the end, that's literally it. The physics in this game have been butchered beyond belief. The handling model is all over the place. It's arcade to the extreme, but not in a good way. It seems that the different road surfaces don't affect the speed of the cars or the handling in any meaningful way. The one exception to this is the in-game mode, NightShift, which has wet roads where everything becomes slipperier than it already is. Cars slide around everywhere in an uncontrollable fashion, and over-reliance on the handbrake is required to compensate for this. You will never use the regular brakes in this game, they are nearly useless. If you slide around a corner too much, it's likely you will hit something on the other side of the track, like a light post, a tree, a car wreck, or a wall. Doing so takes a percentage of health off of your car, which is indicated by text that pops up on the left side of the screen. This number is totally random. Most of the time hitting things, even at speed, will do 2 to 10% damage, which is what you would expect, but sometimes it just outright kills you and you lose the race. Due to the text popping up to show health when damaged, you won't know how much health you have unless you hit something. The AI do way more damage to you than you do to them. In a battle mode, which I'll cover later, the player will be worn down in seconds while the AI takes 2% damage, even on big hits. It's just frustrating and unsatisfying. I wanted to put this here because it really applies to all tracks in this game, but the design and layout of them is terrible. They try to copy the older games where you had the ability to take multiple routes and shortcuts on most of the tracks. Here the shortcuts are often completely pointless and unnecessary, and more often than not are slower than the main route. If you want to cut corners, go right ahead because the grass doesn't even slow you down. In addition to boost, FlatOut 3 has a super move ability that makes your car heavy so you can smash opponents easier, and it refills your boost meter for a short time. When it works, it's fun to see other cars crash and burn after you lightly tap them at speed, but as with everything, it's got some issues. The meter is slow to fill, to the point that you won't get it most races without specifically trying to. Second is that you'll be so far in front most of the time that nobody will be around to use it on, so it's really just a free boost refill. In my playtime, I've used this ability successfully maybe twice. Every other time was pointless. Some smaller broken things that I noticed are that the jump numbers that come up don't make any sense, the tachometer also doesn't make any sense, and it's possible to glitch the game mode menu into making a high-pitched screeching sound. Great. There are 10 game modes in FlatOut 3, each has their own unique feature, but they're all terribly polished. The first of which is a zombie killing mode called Splat Out. In this mode, you're tasked with running over zombies to gain points before a timer runs out. Combos, based on the number of zombies run over in succession, exponentially increase your score and are necessary in order to get a lot of the achievements in this game and progress through the levels. There are a large number of Splat Out challenges with varying layouts and styles. That sounds pretty good in concept, just some wholesome zombie bashing fun. Unfortunately, it's brought down by the fact that it has no reason to be zombie themed. They could be replaced by Sonic's bloody rings, and it wouldn't function the same way. Thematically, zombies and gore could fit into the FlatOut universe, but it's just lazily done here. They just stand in place and make strange noises when run over. It's shocking to me how there can be so many maps but so little depth, a wealth of content that isn't worth playing. You don't even need to drive fast to get a good score. It's actually better to drive slowly and pick off every zombie along the way. Out of the Splat Out themed cars, the monster trucks are easily the best. Their width alone make them objectively better than the rest for getting high combos and scores. Second up to bat, we have Off-Road mode. Now, before we get into this one, I need to say that I think Splat Out is one of the better modes in this game. It seriously just goes downhill from here. Off-Road is essentially point-to-point racing with larger, more open environments and Forza-style flare-based checkpoints. You're given a choice between a few lifted and theoretically off-road oriented cars to take it on. Again, this doesn't sound that bad in theory. It's not exactly original, but it has the potential to be fun. The problem is that the physics make every bump an uneven surface and into an uncontrollable nightmare. It's nearly impossible to drive on the non-road surfaces because of this issue, and if you don't, you won't win the race. Strangely, this is the one mode where I had the most difficulty finishing before the AI. With the aforementioned physics, it's difficult to keep the car in a straight line, let alone win the race. As with all the game modes in this game, it just feels half-baked and underdeveloped. Off-road just doesn't work with physics as bad as these. It doesn't add anything to the game except frustration. NightShift mode is characterized as being a challenging 1v1 race, set at night and in the wet. What could possibly go wrong? The answer? Absolutely everything. What we have here is a combination of the terrible, inconsistent AI, wonky physics, confusing tracks, and janky handling model that lead to one of the more frustrating racing types in this game. One of the few guides on Steam for this game is about how to remove the fog effects to be able to see better while driving, and I'm not surprised. NightShift races basically come down to how badly your opponent crashes around every turn. If they crash really badly, you will win easily. If they only crash lightly, the catch-up will rocket them past you. Often these are 3-lap races and the AI isn't able to finish by the end, the rain effects are poor, it doesn't even look like the droplets are touching the ground. The slippery surface makes very little difference because the physics are slippery anyways. The darkness doesn't add anything to the races except in conjunction with the other effects, make it harder to see where you're going on the track that already have confusing layouts. This mode fails in all aspects and is easily one of the worst that seems to have had some time put into it. Speed mode is both the best and worst mode in this game for a number of reasons. First of which is that the AI cannot handle these cars at all, and they constantly crash around every corner and at every obstacle. And this is honestly a blessing, because it means that the races are extremely easy due to the AI always failing eventually, and that means they're easy to blitz through. The cars used for these are made to look like Formula 1 cars, but handle about as well as your neighborhood Crown Vic rolling on 36s. You can't use the handbrake either, so this might be the only racing series in the game that requires use of the actual brakes. It's fun to check the rearview mirror and watch the AI smash into one another, but this serves no purpose in-game. These races may be higher speed, but if the systems surrounding it can't sustain that, then what's the point? This is hardly a real racing mode and is only good for a few laughs when going for achievements. I love it at times, but I know deep down that speed mode is a failure. Speaking of failure, up next we have the Monster Trucks mode. It's separated into 5 different but similar minigames. We've got smash 40 barrels, push objects into 5 fuel containers, smash 5 buses, push a sea mine into the sewer, and smash 40 car wrecks. All of these take place in the same area, which just so happens to be terribly laid out and very confusing to navigate with such large vehicles. One truck is so large that it doesn't fit on the car select screen, and the character models clip into its wheels. I'm convinced that the Smash 40 barrels and Smash 40 car wrecks are both nearly impossible because they only give you 4 minutes to do them. Smash 5 buses and 5 fuel containers are both much easier, but still made incredibly difficult because monster trucks in this game are incredibly weak. They can barely take any damage, and with as inconsistent a damage system as this game has, it's not possible to know how much simple hits are going to hurt you. Most of the time I wasn't even able to finish these challenges because my truck exploded after hitting a few car wrecks, which I should remind you are part of the objective. They're meant to be hit. And now, there are AI drivers in trucks driving around along with you during these, but as you would probably suspect by now, they are completely useless and can only get in the way. They don't do anything towards the objective and often just drive around aimlessly, smashing into one another and often you. They love to seek you out and cause stupid amounts of damage to your truck, further demonstrating the poor damage model as you die in like 3 hits. Monster trucks in FlatOut sound like a great concept. Monster trucks in FlatOut 3 are terrible and nearly unplayable. Now, of all the modes a good FlatOut game needs, this has got to be one of the most important ones. Battle mode. There are 2 different types of battle modes, one is 12 cars and one is 24. That many cars going at it in an every man for themselves vehicular battle to the death sounds great on paper, but as with everything in this game, it suffers from one major design flaw. Guess what? It's the AI again. They go straight for you no matter what. That combined with the stupid damage system has these matches lasting upwards of 10 minutes without anyone being destroyed. Especially the 24 car battles where you will be driving around aimlessly, being chased by 23 other vehicles doing whatever it takes to scrap your car. When you hit them, it does 1%. When they hit you, it does 20. Both of these modes are made a total mess by the underlying systems that this game has in place. Honestly, with this terrible AI and damage model, nothing can be done correctly, even something as simple as battle mode. The only redeeming part of this is once you finish the monster trucks modes, you can drive that massive truck during battles and pretend to crush everyone. Sadly, it barely does any damage. Stuntman mode is easily the most tedious and frustrating portion of this game. It has no AI or damage physics to worry about, but the levels themselves make it nearly impossible to get through. FlatOut 2 had a similar game mode, but it was varied and fun to play. You send cars rocketing down slopes only to eject your driver into a soccer goal or onto a monkey ball-esque target for points. FlatOut 3 only has the targets, and you'll need to land directly in the center to progress. Point system doesn't matter. The target might as well only be the center portion. It's extremely basic, and you'll have to do it again and again to land properly. The ragdoll physics are inconsistent, and you can hardly move your driver in air, so soon after the windshield exit, you'll know if this was successful or not. There is a golf level in this mode where you have to turn a corner, and I swear it took me 30 minutes and nearly 50 attempts to get right. The only enjoyment I got from this was watching the character land on targets and seeing the terrible destruction physics of those targets. There are a few funny glitches, or just oversights, in here, as the driver with the trench coat glitches out when flying in the air, and there seems to be only one sound effect for grunting when the characters are hitting things. It's very feminine. That means all drivers sound the same, male and female. It's good for a laugh once, but after that you actually have to play the game, and it's not fun. The bread and butter of this game is the race mode. It would be called Quick Race in any other game because you pick the track, car, settings, and gradually unlock more as you win races. As with everything, it's brought down by the AI, driving physics, and general jank in this game. I really don't think I can add anything more to this. It's basically the same as speed mode, but the handbrake works and the cars are different. The tracks are reused and it's just as confusing with pointless shortcuts. The damage model still doesn't work right. This is the 3rd game in this series. You really think they would have learned from the other 2. Finally, challenge mode is just a pre-made playlist of every mode combined into 50 challenges that must be played through in order. It's the closest thing to a campaign that this game has, but it contains nothing new versus just playing the modes separately. They might challenge you to run a certain car on a certain track or something like that, but ultimately this challenge is brought down by the corresponding mode's pitfalls. If you want a good idea of what to expect with this game, start here and play a few levels. At least they don't make you start them at the beginning when you lose. By this point I've mentioned the AI several times, but really just to drive that point home, I thought it would be appropriate to combine all of what I said together into one sentence. FlatOut 3's AI ruins the game, it's so bad. Now that isn't exactly the hottest of hot takes. I've been bringing up this fact throughout the entire video so far. Nearly every mode is plagued by bad AI, It's hard to have a good race in this game because they're so unpredictable. It's easier to look past the wonky physics, terrible sound effects, and bad graphics than it is the AI. They can't handle any speed or corners, they run at you like magnets, purposefully destroying your car and causing you to lose. It's just frustrating gameplay. The AI makes this game not fun when they are present, and therefore ruins the entire experience along with everything else. I would argue that FlatOut 2 on PS2 looks better graphically than FlatOut 3 on PC at max settings. I've been playing at 2K and well over 200 FPS, but this game looks like mud. It was dated when it came out, even for a budget racing game, and it's even more dated today. The textures are muddy, the lighting effects might as well not exist, and the car models are uninspired mismatches of real cars. All of the character models look like they have been ripped from a generic PS2 game, completely lacking the visual cues of the previous entries. Let's be real honest here for a second. FlatOut 2 is a good looking game, but it's not an amazing visual masterpiece, and certainly not the best looking racing game of its time. But just look at these games side by side in motion and tell me which you would rather play. Along with everything else in this game, the graphics are uninspired and half-baked. Check out the art section in the menu to see what could have been. After all of that, I'm sure you're ready to play a good combat racing game, and I've got 3 I'd like to recommend for those of you who are into this type of thing. First up is Bugbear's latest game, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Wreckfest. This has got to be one of the best, if not the best, banger racing games ever made. You won't find any shiny cars here, it's all about derby-style budget racing, and the physics reflect that. It started off a little rough in development with an extended time in early access, but now that the studio has been acquired by THQ Nordic, they are able to finish up the game and it still receives consistent updates. I highly recommend this game if you're into flat-out styles of racing. It's a spiritual successor to the first 2 games, and it could have easily been a revival of the franchise if given the proper title. Guzzlers Extreme is a combat racing game with satisfying explosions and damage physics. It checks every box for me in what I look for in this type of game, including a zombie horde mode that is far better than what's in FlatOut 3. It's way better. If you enjoy racing and shooting at the same time, I would highly recommend this game. It's also got that classic FlatOut style humor that is totally missing from its 3rd entry. If all else fails, just go back and play the classics, specifically FlatOut 2 and the re-release Ultimate Carnage. You won't need to do much to get them working on PC, and they totally hold up today. Both games are worth your time, but I would suggest Ultimate Carnage is the one to play, as it contains everything from FlatOut 2, but with updated visuals and more tracks. Trust me, it's worth it. FlatOut 3 shouldn't bear the FlatOut name. Without that title, it wouldn't need to live up to the series' expectations. Realistically, would it have reviewed so poorly if it was just called Chaos and Destruction? It likely would have just been passed off as another mediocre game trying to ride off the success of the FlatOut franchise, and would have been forgotten with time. Because of that name, it lives in infamy as the worst game in the series, and one of the worst racing games of all time. It had very little chance of living up to the expectations of fans so many years after the best game, FlatOut 2. With its terrible AI, laughable physics, sound effects and music straight from a stock library, half-baked game modes, graphics worse than FlatOut 2, and lacking of all the charm of the originals, it's easy to see why it didn't. FlatOut 2 Chaos and Destruction is chaotically bad and nearly a complete destruction of the franchise. Thank goodness they saved it with FlatOut 4. Oh wait, never mind, just go play Wreckfest. Well, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As you can probably tell, I spent a ridiculous amount of time on this, and there's been a lot of thought put into it as well. I just want to take some time to thank those who have chosen to support this channel. These guys have been supporting for a long time, and they also are the ones who have made this video possible. Can't stress that enough. We have Overlord, That Rice to Explore, QT Bear, Terry Williams, The Most Random Person, 60 Cars and Stuff, Boris Ramirez, Jug, Jacob, and the rest of the supporters. Thank you all for your support. Appreciate all of you guys a lot. And yeah, thank you for sticking around through the ups and the downs of the channel. We've got the Karen Commanders up there with 100,000 views, and then we got the F1 videos with 1,000. We'll see if that changes, but anyway, thank you guys. See you again next time.